minus the charisma. An impressive cop.
Don't do this! Oh.
Is this game worth it? Does that answer your question?
Good morning, Night City! Yesterday's body count lottery rounded out to a solid and sturdy 30. 10 out of Haywood, thanks to unabated gang wars.
I have rewritten parts of this script multiple times, because as the days go on, there's more and more information being spread around like wildfire about Cyberpunk 2077. I mean, what is there to say at this point? Cyberpunk is underdone. CD Projekt Red should have left it in the oven to cook longer, but if they would have delayed it for a fourth time, the gaming community would go into an uproar and be upset that they have to wait another year for it to come out. So it really is a lose-lose situation. Either way, they're making people angry. So what did they do? They took their undercooked game and dumped a bunch of seasoning on it and tried to hold it together with duct tape. There are countless glitches, and I'm sure you've heard all of them. Glitches in cutscenes, quests not activating, trees that are vibing a little too hard, T-poses. I had a problem with OBS recording where the game would just stutter every second, and no matter how many times I changed the setting, it just wouldn't fix the problem. One of the first annoying bugs I encountered was the talk to Victor bug. Thanks to Tyler for providing the fix. Luckily it was easy, you just had to save the game and then reload it. However, it didn't stop me from wasting a lot of time just running around and exhausting all of Victor's dialogue options, thinking I was missing something to push the quest forward. Nope, it was just a bug for one of the earliest quests in the game. I guess the glitches didn't bother me too bad, all the way up until like the first major combat sequence. I might be picky when it comes to combat, but I have a strong love for good shooting mechanics. Like, some of my favorite games are 90s shooters, because the engine these games were built on are very satisfying to play. I enjoyed the shooting mechanics in games like the original Doom, or Iron Maiden, or Proteus. All these games are very fun to play, and regardless of the stories or characters, if the game isn't fun to play, then it'll be extremely difficult to enjoy it. And that's why when I got into the first combat section of Cyberpunk, it made me want to quit the game right then and there, which is a harsh contrast to how I felt when I first booted the game up. If you can look past all of its glitches, Cyberpunk is one of the most immersive games I have ever seen. From its beautiful buildings and cityscapes, to the sprawling energy through all the people who inhabit it. For the first time in a long time, I was eager to adventure around and explore all of its nooks and crannies. Just like adventuring around Mario Sunshine for the first time as a kid. Okay, so I know Mario Sunshine and Cyberpunk 2077 are two completely different games, but the drive to explore and take in every detail was exactly the same. Like, for the first 5 hours of the game, I was just looking at all the shops and vehicles and like back alleys, all the food stands and people. It was amazing. And the story was amazing as well. Granted, I didn't fully understand what was going on until like 2/3 of the way through, and even then I still had some questions that I needed to look up on Google. But I don't fault the game, I fault my tiny squirrel-like attention span. The voice acting in this game is top-notch, and Keanu Reeves did a good job in my opinion. My fiance thinks he sounds like a lifeless brick, but I mean, she's not the only one to think that, and I can understand why.
Sit. Stay.
Every character has a great backstory. My favorite, of course, being Jackie. He's the one I easily became attached to. My point is if you can look past the surface level glitches, there's a very well acted and compelling story. But the closer you look at the game, the more its beautiful paint starts to chip. Don't get me wrong, I love Night City, and I'll always take a more densely populated map instead of a big one. I'm looking at you, Bethesda. But the more I went around Night City and talked to people, the more I realized they just say the same lifeless expressions. It's not any better than running into like the NPCs of the first Spider-Man game.
People like you always got something to sell.
Thank you so much. You saved my life.
No harm, no foul.
When you shoot a gun, everyone just kind of cowers in fear. That is, if they don't just disappear. And what's the most fun about Grand Theft Auto's cops? The fact that they chase you down, right? Well, Grand Theft Auto has been doing that since the first game in 1997. Seems like the cops would chase you in Cyberpunk as well, but as soon as you get out of eyeshot, they just stop. I tried experimenting with triggering the cops as much as possible to see if any of them would chase me, but really the only thing that seemed to happen is they'd just forget I ever existed. And Woods from Beat 'em Ups ran into this whole problem where people would just spawn in on him and kill him instantly. It seems like a few people ran into that problem.
This is the same game that promised realistic day and night cycles, and their way of handling the police is to have them immediately start appearing in your area like hot singles.
How can a game that came out in the early 2000s like Grand Theft Auto 4 do AI so much better than a game that just came out at the end of 2020? On top of the world jankiness, the combat was getting worse with every quest. It was such a pain to shoot people in this game that I tried to sneak around. But the stealth mechanics in this game were so inconsistent that it was a pain as well. So what are you left to do? I found out that literally just running through some areas was better than shooting or stealth. I think the cherry on top for everything janky about this game is the boss fights. Every single one of them were just awful. Like, you run around and then you shoot, and then you run around and then you shoot. Oh, is that a different attack? Oh, no. You just run around and shoot. It was awful. The only boss fight that worked for me was the first one, and it was boring as hell. And then the other boss fights, they just glitched out in their pathing, would just get stuck, or they would just spam an attack that couldn't possibly reach me. The worst, though, was the fight with Oda. He eventually got stuck levitating. I kept shooting until I was out of bullets, and then I was forced to just punch him in the crotch until I whittled his health down to 0, and it was terrible. I know it seems like I'm just ripping on this game, and it seems like I hate it, but I don't. There's so much potential here. I would walk away from these combat scenarios pissed off, but I couldn't get the game out of my head. I kept thinking about what would happen next in the story, and I needed to know. So I'd sit back down, and I'd play another few hours until I was upset with it again, and then rinse and repeat. And that to me is the biggest problem with this game. Cyberpunk is so enjoyable, and yet awful at the same time. But there's a very key thing that I learned from this whole experience. I learned how to be patient with games again. What I mean is, as a kid, we couldn't just go out and buy games for ourselves. We had to ask our parents, or sometimes the other parent when one would say no. You know what I mean. We'd get a new game as a gift or by saving up money. Before you got a job and had the freedom to buy whatever games you wanted, owning games was much harder to come by. It made you appreciate them more. Have you actually tried to play the original Mario Bros. Now? Now, unless you haven't stopped playing it since you started, it's a pretty tough game. Like, I can barely get to World 4, let alone beat the game like I did as a kid. When Mario 3D All-Stars came out a little bit ago, I decided to play through all 3 games chronologically. I booted up Mario 64 on stream and proceeded to get my ass kicked for over 3 hours. Oh, come here, come here, swear to God. Oh, no. Whew. God, what the? All right. Jesus. Jesus. No, why? Please, I don't remember this being so hard. Is it because I suck at games? Probably. But more so, it is a tough game. When you typically think back on a game like this, you think of usually the first world, like Bomb Battlefield, and then you usually think of any like super hard levels like Rainbow Ride. But what you forget is all the hardships from learning the game and getting through it the first time. I guarantee you, if the average Joe picked up Mario 64 and tried playing through it, they would quit in the beginning and give it a horrible review on Kotaku or IGN, and then all the content creators on YouTube would hop on the bandwagon and continue to rip apart the game until it became a laughingstock, and no one could ever bear to spit in the direction of Mario 64. It's harsh, but it's true. But instead, we think back on these tough games fondly, because it brings us back to our childhood when things were much simpler. My whole point in rambling about this is back then we had to be more patient with video games. We didn't have the choice to just chalk it up to a loss and move on to the next one. If something bugged out, we restarted the game. If we were stuck on a level, it's countless hours of running around and trying to figure out what to do. And then when you find the answer to the puzzle, or the door that was hidden, or you kill the boss that killed you 100 times over, you feel triumphant, like you just accomplished a crazy heroic feat. That's an amazing feeling. Cyberpunk 2077 taught me how to look at flaws in the face and overcome them in the end. Because no matter how many bugs it could throw at me, or how many annoying combat situations, I trudged on till the end, and in my opinion, it was 100% worth it. My fiance made me realize something very important. CD Projekt Red has passion. I don't believe that they sat down, hyped up this game to the extreme, and then purposefully released it broken. I think someone high up the ladder didn't care about the state of the game and wanted it out before Christmas so that they could sweep in all of that holiday money. So in order to meet that deadline, Projekt Red developed the game where it counted, and that's the story. The gameplay is pretty awful, but I could not stop thinking about the game because of the world and characters that they built. I really hope they continue to fix this because I want to play through it again, but the combat is keeping me away from doing so. However, I'll never forget this game because Cyberpunk achieved the impossible. It made me patient with games again. I really enjoyed exploring and living through the world that is Night City. I was V, hellbent on becoming famous on the streets, being a name that people feared, to then have my life turned over and struggle to survive every day in a crazy, corrupt world, obsessed with modification, sex, and physical appearances. It was definitely an experience, and a lesson that I'll never forget. This game isn't worth $60, but I do believe it is worth some money for the story alone. It's easy to hate a game like this, but keep in mind your childhood games that you think of fondly. Are they perfect, or did you have the patience to sit and play through it for what it is? Thanks.